I'm Athena Chambers. I'm 34. 2 days before Christmas, I stood on my parents' porch with a tray of gingerbread in my hands. Food for a party my own son wasn't welcome to attend. No kids this year. My mother had told me over the phone. None at all. It's just simpler that way. I took her at her word. Then, through the front window, I spotted my sister's 3 children sitting by the tree in matching pajamas, tinsel tangled in their hair, working through a plate of cookies. My mother opened the door and stood there filling the whole frame and said something I'll carry with me forever. These children deserve to be here. What none of them realized was this. 3 weeks before that night, I'd found a folded piece of paper tucked in my mother's junk drawer, buried among coupons and spare batteries. And what I did with that piece of paper at their Christmas gathering unraveled $18,000 of deception and their grip on my family in under 4 minutes. Welcome to Arma Never Sleeper, where women who spent years staying quiet finally speak up about what that silence cost them. These are stories about family, about money, and about the exact moment a patient person runs out of patience. If this one lands close to home, leave a comment and subscribe. You'll want to stick around for how it ends. Cedar Grove, Ohio is one of those towns where the pharmacist knows your kid's name and actually means it when he asks. 9,000 people, 2 traffic lights, a single hospital. I've worked at that hospital for 11 years as a pediatric nurse, mostly night. I'm the one they page when a toddler needs an IV and nobody else can find the vein. My hands don't tremble, not because I'm fearless, but because I've been trained not to be. In this line of work, panic doesn't help anyone. Nobody's paying a nurse to fall apart. The other charge nurses call me the calm one. And over the years, I've noticed something. The calmer I stay, the worse the situation usually turns out to be. Hold on to that thought. It matters later. At home, though, I'm just Caleb's mom. He's sick, missing a front tooth, obsessed with dinosaurs, and firmly convinced that wood glue solves every problem. A belief he picked up from his grandfather Hal. Saturdays mean pancakes, no exceptions, even after a 12-hour shift that leaves me smelling like sanitizer and apple juice. Our home is small, 3 bedrooms, blue shutters, but it's fully paid off, every last board of it. I built this life piece by piece. A nursing scholarship, 2 jobs at once, used textbook, a car that needed sweet talking to start. Nobody gave me a head start, and honestly, I didn't mind. When you build something yourself, you know exactly where every nail is and what it cost you. What I hadn't figured out yet that winter was that someone else had been running their own calculations on my life. Someone who'd looked at what I had and quietly decided a slice of it belonged to them. They just never intended to ask outright. My husband, Travis Chambers, worked as a lineman for the county electric company, the kind of guy who'd climb a pole in freezing rain to keep other families' lights on. In June of 2023, driving home from storm repairs near Marion, a truck crossed into his lane. He was 33. Caleb was 4. I was 31. That's when I learned grief doesn't announce itself. It just moves in and stays. The insurance payout from his employer came to $150,000. I didn't spend it on anything flashy. I paid off the house outright and put the remainder into a college fund for Caleb. In a way, my husband is still the one keeping a roof over his son's head. That's who he was. His boots still sit by the back door. I've never had the heart to move them. And to their credit, nobody in the Chambers family has ever asked me to. Because that's the thing about Travis's parents. Hal and Ruth, they didn't disappear after the funeral the way so many in-laws are warned they might. Every single Sunday, there's a place set for me and a booster seat waiting for Caleb. No invitation required. Ruth's taught him to roll out pie dough. Hal's taught him to build a birdhouse, letting him hammer every nail crooked and calling it character. Behind their property sits an old apple orchard, 8 minutes from my house, and to my son, it's the center of the universe. I mention them now because it matters for what comes later. I wasn't raised to think family had to be a show. I married into people who proved it doesn't. But not everyone who looked at that insurance money saw a widow trying to rebuild. Somewhere across town, someone saw an unlocked door. In January 2024, 7 months after Travis's funeral, my mother called and asked me to come over, alone. I made the 12-minute drive with my stomach in knots because Lorraine Hollis doesn't ask for things. She orchestrates them. In her kitchen, under the fluorescent light, she pushed a letter across the table toward me. Past due, in red across the top. My father sat at the far end, staring out at the frozen yard like it had wronged him personally. To understand that look, you need to know his history. In 2021, the plastics plant where he'd worked for 34 years shut down. At 59, he found himself standing in a job fair line next to teenagers. Nobody called him back. His pension came in smaller than promised, and these days, he works part-time stocking shelves at my brother-in-law's HVAC warehouse. My mother laced her fingers together like she was praying. 10 more days, and the bank starts the paperwork. Athena, we could lose the house you grew up in. Then her voice dropped, conspiratorial. Your father would rather die than let the guild ladies see a foreclosure sign on this lawn. The Brookside Lady Guild world is my mother's entire world. She chairs the hospitality committee. Losing that house wouldn't just mean losing a house. It would mean losing face in front of the only audience she's ever truly cared about. I looked at my father's hand, weathered from 34 winters of shift work. I looked at that red stamped letter, and I did what nurses do when things go sideways. I moved toward the problem. I pulled out my phone right there at the table. Before you write me off as naive, hear what I actually did, because I've replayed this moment dozens of times. I didn't just fork over cash. I said, let me call the credit union tomorrow morning. I'll pay them directly, straight onto the loan. My mother had a rebuttal ready before I'd even finished. The auto pay was linked to my father's account, she explained. Switching who paid meant a trip to the branch, forms, both their signatures, and there simply wasn't time. 10 days, maybe less. Then she delivered the line she knew would land. Your father won't stand at that counter while his daughter settles his debts in front of the whole town. That man has already lost his job and half his pension.
Let him keep some.
I asked to see the statement. I want that on record because I did ask. She returned from the bedroom with what looked like a real one. Maple Valley Credit Union letterhead, the red stamp, the account number, but it was folded in half, her thumb pinning it shut while I skimmed the balance line. The date sat right beneath that crease. I did everything by the book except one thing. I let a folded corner stay folded. That night I set up an automatic transfer. $650, the first of every month. And I sent January's payment immediately to stop whatever 10-day clock supposedly existed. My mother cried at her table and called me her good girl, her responsible one. My father never turned around. I told myself his silence was shame about needing help. It was shame, all right. I just had the diagnosis wrong. That transfer started as quietly as a heartbeat, and it wouldn't stop for another 23 months. A monthly transfer has a way of becoming background noise. You stop noticing it there. What I should have been watching was everything else piling on top of it. In July 2024, my mother needed gum surgery. $1,200. Insurance supposedly wouldn't cover it. She called from the dentist parking lot, her voice paper thin. I sent it. In March 2025, the furnace gave out. $900. The repairman's standing in my kitchen right now, honey, she said, and I could hear a man coughing in the background. I sent that too. Every crisis arrived with a deadline, a prop, a performance, and each one landed on a night when I was too exhausted from a shift to ask questions. Here's what else was happening during those same months. 2 pictures I eventually had to hold up side by side. My sister Brittany posted a photo of a brand new minivan in her driveway, captioned, "Bless." My niece Madison, 10 years old and perpetually in a cheer uniform, flew with the whole Kessler family to nationals in Columbus, everyone in matching shirts. Brittany is 37. Her husband Doug owns the HVAC company where my father stocks shelves, a business the whole town knew had been struggling since 2022. And yet somehow their life kept getting shinier while my parents' furnace kept dying. I wasn't blind to it. I told myself Doug's business must have turned a corner, that the minivan was financed. That cheer came with scholarship. Nurses are trained to document everything. Daughters, apparently, are trained to forget. So those 2 images sat side by side in my mind for months, and I kept refusing to connect them because the line between them ran straight through my mother's kitchen, and I wasn't ready to follow it. While my bank account was quietly being harvested, something else, quieter still, was happening to my son. And I want to be clear, I didn't just let that slide. At Thanksgiving 2024, my mother set the grandkids' table with Madison, Kayla, and Tyler, cloth napkins, the good glassware. Caleb's plate went on a card table in the garage, next to the recycling bin. For space, she said. I didn't make a scene. I picked up my plate and his, carried them out to the garage, and we ate together in our coats, laughing about the fog our breath made. On my way out, I said exactly one thing flat and even. If the garage is good enough for my son, it's good enough for me. After that, I cut our visits down to once a month. I don't fight about seating arrangement. I just choose where I sit. Then came Caleb's 6th birthday in June 2025. A card signed Grandma and Grandpa in my mother's handwriting with a $5 bill tucked inside. That same week, Madison was flown to Columbus for a grandparents' weekend. Hotel, cheer competition, a brand new warm-up jacket in the photo. I called my mother and calmly asked why one grandchild got a weekend away and the other got $5. She sighed like I was the unreasonable one. Madison's activities are expensive, Athena. Caleb's 6, he doesn't know the difference. My son knew the difference. 6-year-olds always do. They just don't have words for it yet, so they hand the ache to their mothers to carry. I hung up and told myself things couldn't get worse than this. It wasn't even close to the worst of it. Let me put a number on what $650 a month actually costs, because the money itself is the smallest part of the story. It's 2 extra 12-hour shifts every month, meaning 2 more mornings where Caleb eats cereal at Ruth's counter while I sleep with earplugs in. It's swim lessons pushed back a season. It's tires nursed along into November, praying the first snow would hold off. A budget sheet sweet live taped inside my cupboard, and above groceries, above even Caleb, sat the line, Mom and Dad. Every morning, coffee dripping, I'd study that sheet and feel something I couldn't quite name, a tight knot under my rib. I called it guilt. Nurses are experts at relabeling pain until the shift ends. Then came the first week of November 2025. My mother's voice on the phone was pure syrup. The family Christmas party would be at their house. Christmas Eve this year, guild ladies included, the pastor's wife, everyone. Could I help with food? $300, just this one, times being what they are. I agreed before she'd even finished the sentence. Of course I did. Then, almost as an afterthought, oh, and sweetheart, adult only this year, no kid. It's just simpler for everyone. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, staring at a drawing taped to the fridge, a T-Rex in a Santa hat, made that very morning by my 6-year-old. I just agreed to buy the food for a party he was banned from, and the guest list, it would turn out, still had one more twist waiting in it. Here's the part that still catches in my chest. Before I found the words to explain the party to Caleb, he showed me what he'd spent 3 evenings building in Hal's workshop. A small wooden star, cut slightly crooked, sanded smooth, painted gold with more heart than precision. On the back, burned in wobbly letters with Hal's wood-burning tool. While Hal hovered like a nervous surgeon, it read, Grandma L. It's an ornament, he told me, missing tooth and beaming, for Grandma Lorraine's tree. Can I give it to her at the party? I called my mother back that night, keeping my tone light. I asked for 15 minutes, just 15, at the start of the evening, so a 6-year-old could hand his grandmother a wooden star and leave. She didn't even pretend to consider it. Rules are rules, Athena. Don't make this difficult. Then, softer, the tone people use to talk someone off a ledge they themselves built. Christmas is for the grown-up this year. He won't even remember it by Easter. He won't even remember it. I looked across the room at my son, the same boy, who still remembered exactly which seat he'd been given in that garage a year earlier, who remembered that Madison's shoes came from Grandma, who remembered everything, because children run on memory and hope in roughly equal measure. I told him Grandma's party would be boring, just taxes and coffee talk, and that we'd find a better place for his star. He took it the way kids take these things, quietly, then back to his dinosaurs. The star sat on our counter for weeks, its crooked golden arms pointing at me like an unanswered question. That Sunday, in Ruth's kitchen, I got to see what family looks like when it isn't a performance. Flour dusting the counters, Caleb standing on a chair cutting biscuit with a water glass, Hal sketching birdhouse blueprint like he was drafting legislation, Ruth already planning Christmas morning at the orchard, Coco on the porch, paper crowns, Hal threatening to climb onto the roof with sleigh bells, which at 67 would have been a legitimate medical emergency. Ruth handed me a dish towel and asked, in that mild voice that misses absolutely nothing, so they asked you for party money. For a party the little one can't even attend. I started explaining hard times, Dad's pension, the furnace, the guild ladies humming, how helping felt easier than arguing. Ruth dried her hands and looked at me the way she looks at a pie that won't set. Honey, you don't owe anybody a bridge that only carries traffic one direction. She didn't push further than that. That's Ruth's way. She plants one sentence and lets time do the rest. Driving home that night, 8 minutes of dark road and Christmas light, I felt that knot under my ribs shift. Someone outside my own head had finally said the quiet part out loud. The money flowed one direction, the love flowed one direction, and the rules only ever seemed to land on one grandchild in this family, mine. I gripped the wheel and did what I always do with pain I haven't processed yet. I filed it away. Christmas was 3 weeks out. I told myself I'd get through the holidays and deal with it after. The junk drawer had other plans. If you've ever handed your family money and told yourself the knot in your stomach was just guilt, stay with me. I ignored mine for 2 years, and it cost $18,000 to find out what it was actually trying to tell me. New here? Subscribe and let me know in the comments. Has your family ever made you feel like a bank account with a heartbeat? Thanksgiving 2025 was one of our monthly visits, and I almost skipped. The house smelled like sage and simmering resentment. Brittany arrived with her kid, dressed in coordinated plaid. Doug talked loudly about truck payment, clearly hoping for an audience. Madison bounced through the living room in brand new cheer shoes, white with glitter trim, easily more expensive than my electric bill, and nearly toppled the china cabinet doing a toe touch in the hallway. Everyone laughed. The afternoon rolled on the way these afternoons always did. My mother conducting the room like a symphony. My son tucked into a corner with his dinosaurs, careful and watchful and small. It was on the drive home that everything cracked open. Caleb buckled into his booster seat, watching the streetlights slide by. Said it the way kids say enormous things, with no warning at all. Madison said Grandma bought her cheer shoes. A pause, then the line that slit me clean through. Grandma never buys me shoes. I caught my own eyes in the rearview mirror and watched them change, because I was finally doing the math I'd spent 2 years avoiding. Cheer shoes. Nationals in Columbus. A minivan captioned, blessed. A a furnace that happened to die that same spring. Kids don't know which sentences are made of glass. They just hand them to you anyway. And I remembered something else from that afternoon. A half second I'd filed away and forgotten. When Madison spun around in those shoes announcing that Grandma bought them, my mother's expression didn't warm. It went completely still, like plaster. The face of someone doing damage control. I drove the rest of the way home, well under the speed limit, both hands on the wheel. I didn't let it sit. The next evening I called my mother, kept my tone as breezy as a grocery list, and asked, "Did you buy Madison's cheer shoes?" She laughed, already prepared, which in hindsight told me everything, because prepared people sound exactly like innocent ones. The consignment sale at the church, honey. $12. That child tells everyone Grandma bought her things because it makes her feel special. You know how Madison is. And here's the twist. There really had been a consignment sale at the church that October. I'd seen the flyer myself, taped to the choir room door. The lie had scaffolding. Good lies always do. I said something pleasant and hung up, standing in my kitchen wanting so badly to believe her that it physically hurt. Believing her was the cheaper option. It meant my family was just careless, which is survivable, rather than calculating, which is something else entirely. But I've been a nurse too long. When the numbers don't add up, you don't argue with them or cry over them. You flag the chart and keep watching the patient. So that's exactly what I did with my own mother. I flagged her, standing in front of my fridge, in front of that budget sheet with Mom and Dad written across the top line. I gave the story one more chance to be true. $12 consignment fine. A generous embellishment from a 10-year-old who liked to feel fancy. Fine. I might have swallowed that story forever, and this would be a very different story if it weren't for a pair of scissors. The first week of December, my mother called again. The propane tank was low. Prices were up. Winter came early. Could I send $200? By then, the knot under my ribs had learned how to speak. So I tried something different. Instead of money, I went shopping. I filled 4 bags with staples, soup, coffee, flour, the good peanut butter, and picked up a prepaid propane card at the hardware store, the kind you hand straight to the delivery driver. Then I drove the 12 minutes over and carried it all in myself. I want you to watch my mother's face the way I did, because for 1 second, the mask was late. When she saw groceries instead of an envelope, before the smile could load, her expression showed pure, undisguised disappointment. The look you give a vending machine that shorted your change. Then the smile clicked into place. A beat too late. "You're so thoughtful, sweetheart. But next time just send the money. It's easier. I know what we actually need." I stacked cans onto her pantry shelves with my back turned so she couldn't watch my own face doing math. Groceries feed a household. They don't feed whatever my money had actually been feeding. A propane card doesn't buy a seat at Cheer Nationals in Columbus. Soup doesn't cover a minivan payment. I didn't say any of that out loud. I mentioned the coffee was running low and that Caleb had drawn her a dinosaur. She answered on autopilot. 2 years of emergencies, and the one time I brought exactly what a struggling household needs, I'd somehow done it wrong. I dried my hands on her Christmas towel and asked where the scissors were. The propane card was zip-tied to a cardboard backer, and my mother's scissors live exactly where every mother's scissors live. The junk drawer by the wall phone. Third one down. The same collection of batteries, rubber bands, coupons, and dead pens that had probably been in there since the 80s. My mother wasn't even in the room. Brittany had called about the party trip, and Lorraine took her calls the way surgeons take pages, vanishing instantly to another room with the door half shut. So I was alone in the kitchen I grew up in, my mother's voice murmuring down the hallway when I opened that drawer looking for scissors. They were there, tucked beneath a coupon envelope. So was something else. A window envelope from Maple Valley Credit Union, addressed to Frank and Lorraine Hollis, already opened, 1 page inside. I recognized that logo instantly. It was the same one I'd been sending $650 toward every month for almost 2 years. To this day, I can honestly say I only meant to move it aside. That's the truth. My fingers were on the scissors when the envelope shifted and the page slid partway out and printed across the top. In that plain, confident type banks use when they have nothing to worry about were words that had no business sharing a house with past due. I went completely still. Down the hall, my mother laughed at something Brittany said. I set the scissors down and unfolded the page right there next to the coupons, and the kitchen went very quiet. It was a payoff letter, the kind a bank sends exactly once in the life of a loan, addressed to Frank and Lorraine Hollis, dated 9 years earlier. They'd kept it the way other people frame a diploma. One paragraph. This letter confirms that mortgage account ending 4471 has been paid in full as of October 14, 2016. I read it 3 times. The way you triple check a medication dose, hoping the second and third pass will change the first. October 2016. But 9 years before my mother slid a past due notice across that same table, with her hands trembling right on cue. Unless they'd taken out a new loan against the house since then. There had been nothing to foreclose clothes on since before Caleb was even born, before Travis and I had started talking about kids. That was the one possibility still open, and standing right there beside the coupons, I decided I was going to close it myself. I want to be honest about what happened next, because people picture themselves screaming in that kitchen, and I understand why I didn't scream. 11 years of night shifts have built something into me that takes over when the news is worse. A stillness that shows up like a second nurse walking in. I memorized the account number and the date. I refolded the page along its original crease, slid the envelope back under the coupons the same angle I'd found it, and closed the drawer. I cut the propane card free, left it on the counter with the scissors squared on top, brought in the last grocery bag, kissed my mother's cheek while she was still mid-call, and drove the 12 minutes home with the radio off. 9 years, barring some surprise behind that last door, I'd been rescuing a house that was never in danger because someone had figured out that a grieving nurse pays her family's bills without demanding to see the wound first. That night, once Caleb was asleep with an arm wrapped around his stuffed triceratops, I sat at the kitchen table and finally did what I should have done 2 years earlier. I documented it. I logged into my banking app and printed every transfer to my parents since January 2024. They came out of the printer in neat gray rows, patient as evident. 24 transfers of $650, January 2024 through this past December, $15,600. Then the one-off emergencies, gum surgery, July 2024, $1,200. Furnace, March 2025, $900. Christmas party food, November 2025, $300. I wrote it all out on a sheet of Caleb's graph paper, 1 line per wound, and totaled it the way I total intake and output at the end of a shift. $18,000 exactly. Then I opened Facebook. Since my sister has never once locked down her account, she broadcast everything and matched the date. The same week the furnace supposedly died, March 2025, the Kessler family was at Cheer Nationals in Columbus. 4 tickets, 2 hotel rooms, matching shirts reading Madison's Army. The same week as the gum surgery, July 2024, that minivan showed up in their driveway, captioned "Blessed." I sat back and looked at the 2 columns side by side, my emergencies, her milestones, lined up like a heart monitor next to a receipt. Every single crisis at my mother's house lined up with a celebration at my sister's. I didn't need a detective. I needed a printer and 1 quiet hour. And underneath all that cold arithmetic, one warmer, harder thought kept surfacing. Dad signed for that house. Dad knew. Dad watched me pay. Here's something most people don't realize, and it's the reason this story ends with paperwork instead of a shouting match. Once a mortgage is paid off, the lender files a satisfaction of mortgage with the county recorder, a public record. Anyone can walk in and ask to see it. No lawyer, no drama, just a few dollars for a certified copy. So on my lunch break the next day, still in scrubs, I walked into the Ardan County Recorder's office in the courthouse annex and gave the clerk my parents' names. It took her about 4 minutes. Satisfaction of mortgage, Maple Valley Credit Union, releasing Frank and Lorraine Hollis's mortgage, recorded October 2016. Then she ran the index forward for me to present. No new mortgage, no home equity loan, no liens. That last door closed with a click only I could hear. She stamped my copy, certified, the raised county seal you can feel under your thumb like Braille. The county doesn't lie for anybody. That might be the nicest thing about paperwork. On my way back to work, I stopped at the credit union. I want to be fair here. The teller did nothing wrong. I didn't ask about my parents' accounts specifically, and she'd have shut that down if I had. I asked general questions instead. Do late notices go anywhere besides the account holder? No. When did the letter format last change? She showed me a sample of their current past due notice, redesigned back in 2019. New logo, blue banner. The letter my mother had slid across her table in January 2024 still had the old red stamp, the outdated format. It was a genuine letter, just a relic from another decade, reused like a prop. Now I knew what had happened, and roughly how much and how long. What I still didn't understand was how my father had sat through every act of it without a word. I worked a night shift with all of it sitting in my chest like a swallowed stone. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, restocking a supply cart in an empty hallway, it hit me what this feeling actually was. Bullshit. I've sat across from parents in the family room off the pediatric ward and delivered the worst sentence of their lives. Watched the exact moment they stop hearing the monitors and start hearing their new reality. That was me now. I'd just been handed a diagnosis about my own family, one that had been quietly progressing for 2 years without a single symptom I'd let myself read. When I got home that morning, sleep wasn't happening. I pulled down the box where I keep Travis's papers, looking for my copy of the insurance documents, wanting the numbers straight before I did anything else. Tucked between the folders, I found a card, one Travis had bought for Caleb's first birthday, written something in it, and we'd agreed to save for when he was older. I'd forgotten the exact wording. His handwriting was always rough, stuff, an electrician's hands. I traced it twice to be sure. Be the kind of man who tells the truth, even when his voice shakes. I sat on my bedroom floor with that card for a long while. Then I made two decisions, in the order that mattered. First, no ambush, no social media post, no screaming match, because performance is my mother's specialty, not mine. Second, someone in that house deserved one clean chance to tell the truth on their own terms. I decided my father would get that chance. On December 14th, I went looking for him. But first, I drove the 8 minutes to the orchard, because I've learned you don't walk into surgery without a consult first. Ruth poured 2 mugs of the strong stuff, and I laid it all out on her kitchen table. The certified copy with its raised seal, the graph paper ledger totaling $18,000, the dates lined up against my sister's celebrations like a dance card. Ruth read through everything twice without saying a word. She's the only person I know whose silence feels like being held. Through the window, I could see Hal and Caleb on the porch fixing a hinge on the birdhouse. My son, holding the screwdriver with his tongue poking out sideways, exactly the way Travis used to. Finally, Ruth set the ledger down and asked, "What do you want, Athena? Not what do they deserve. What do you want?" I told her the truth. I wanted it to stop. I wanted my son to never again be the only child eating in a garage. And I didn't want to become the person screaming in a driveway, because that person loses even when she's right. Ruth nodded slowly. Truth told calm is still truth, but you tell it standing up, not kneeling. We built the plan right there over those mugs. Step 1. My father gets asked directly, privately. One honest shot at telling the truth with dignity intact. Step 2. If the lying continued, especially in public, the truth would be told in public too. Once, calmly, with the paperwork doing the talking, Ruth walked me to my car and squeezed my hand on the porch step. "You're not burning a bridge, honey. You're just done paying the toll on it." December 14th, lunchtime. I found my father exactly where I expected, alone on the loading dock at Doug's warehouse, eating a sandwich out of the same dented lunchbox he's carried since before I was born. 34 years at the plant. And when it closed, that lunchbox was all he walked out with. I sat down beside him on an overturned crate and didn't dress it up. The mortgage was paid off in October 2016. Dad, I've seen the county record, the release. I've been sending money to stop a foreclosure that hasn't existed for almost 2 years. His hands went still on the lunchbox lid, then started to shake. And my father doesn't have hands that shake. These are hands that rewired our basement in a weekend. He didn't deny it, and I'll give him that much. I've turned it over many nights since. He stared out at the parking lot. "Your mother handles the envelope, honey. A man's got to keep something." Then, quieter, like a confession that had waited years for someone to hear it. It was supposed to stop after a few months. I asked him the one question I'd come to ask. "Will you tell the truth at Christmas? In front of everyone? I'll stand right next to you when you do." And I watched my father, the man who once carried me on his shoulders through the county fair, stare down at the concrete and make his choice. "Don't make me choose, Athena. Your mother, your sister, this job." He tilted his chin toward the warehouse behind him, his son-in-law's warehouse, the only place still willing to give a 63-year-old man a paycheck and a reason to get up in the morning. I stood, kissed the top of his head, and left him there with his sandwich. Before I tell you what happened with that county stamp, consider hers this. If a nurse from Ohio can sit across from her own father on a loading dock and keep her voice steady, you can survive the conversation you've been putting off too. Subscribe if you're sticking around for the party, because everything so far has just been setting the table. My father went home that night and told my mother. I know because the family phone tree lit up before the weekend was out, and it wasn't anything close to an apology tour. It was a controlled burn. My mother didn't call me. She called around me. Her sister-in-law, my Aunt Carol, and at least 2 guild ladies got the same smooth funeral flower story. Poor Athena. She hasn't been the same since Travis passed. She's gotten strange about money. Recites every dollar she's ever given us. Now she's imagining some conspiracy about the house. Pray for her. It's a classic maneuver, and I want you to recognize it, because I had to learn it the hard way. When a liar senses the truth closing in, they don't fight the evidence. They discredit the witness first, so that when the truth finally comes out, the room hears grief instead of facts. There was exactly one crack in that plan, and her name was Carol. Aunt Carol is my father's younger sister, 58, sharp as a blade, allergic to every kind of perfume, including the verbal kind. She'd watched the plant close. She knew precisely whose warehouse cut her brother's small paycheck, and she'd already wondered out loud, more than once, how Frank and Lorraine seemed to be managing so comfortably. So instead of praying for me, Carol called me directly. "Your mother's telling everyone you've gone strange about money," she said. "No hello?" Because Carol doesn't waste words. "What's actually going on, child?" I looked at the yellow folder already squared on my counter and kept my answers short, because some invitations work better as invitation. "Come to the Christmas party, Aunt Carol. Watch who goes strange." 2 days later, my sister called, opening with sugar the way she always does. "Hey, Mom says you're coming Christmas Eve. It's going to be so nice." Then the pivot, bright as a blade under a dish towel. It's adults only though, so don't make it weird about Caleb, okay? He'll live. I said nothing, which with Brittany is like leaving a door wide open in a windstorm. She kept talking, her voice dropping out of its sugar register into something older, something I remembered from childhood fight over who got the last of something. And Athena, whatever little spreadsheet you think you're building over there, stop. Stop keeping score of other people's blessings. Some of us actually work for what we have. Some of us didn't get a widow's jackpot. A widow's jackpot. My husband came home from a storm repair job in a closed casket, and to my sister, the insurance money that paid off his son's bedroom was a lottery win. Some unfairness done to her personally. People eventually show you their math. In Brittany's version, everything I had was luck. Everything she had was earned. And the $18,000 that flowed from my night shift through my mother's kitchen and into her minivan was simply the universe correcting an old mistake. I didn't bother explaining the real numbers. You can't argue with a ledger written in crayon. See you at the party, Britt, I said, gentle as taking someone's blood pressure, and hung up mid-sentence, which I've been told is rude and which I've decided I can live with. She thought my silence meant she'd won. I let her keep thinking that. Wrapping paper stays on until morning. That's the whole point of it. Mate, let me tell you exactly what I brought to that party, because it fit inside my purse and weighed less than a paperback. One yellow folder, the same kind we use for hospital chart, because you reach for the tools your hands trust. Inside, page 1, the certified copy of the satisfaction of mortgage, October 2016, raised seal and all. Page 2, my graph paper ledger, 24 transfers plus 3 emergencies, $18,000 exactly, every line dated. Page 3, a simple 2-column list, her emergencies on the left, my sister's celebrations on the right. No commentary needed because the dates spoke for themselves. That same week, I stopped by my bank and asked one question. If I cancel a standing transfer through the app, how fast does it take effect? Immediately, the young man said. 4 tap. I thanked him and left the transfer running for now. I want you to understand why. Because this is the part I'd underline if it were a chart. I wasn't building an ambush. I was building a choice. I made myself a quiet rule at my kitchen table, one I never wrote down but kept anyway. If they told the truth at that party, or even just said nothing at all, the conversation would happen privately in January. Family only, door closed. But if they stood in that living room, in front of the guild and the pastor's wife, and repeated the lie one more time over food I'd paid for, then the truth would be spoken exactly where the lie had lived, in public, once, calmly. I've delivered worse news to families with steadier hands than this would ever require. December 23rd, late afternoon. I drove over to drop off what I'd promised for the party, a tray of gingerbread and a good cheese board, because whatever else was true, I'd given my word, and I keep it even for people who don't return the favor. Caleb was at the orchard helping Ruth butter cookie sheet, so I was alone when I pulled up and saw the glow in the front window and what that glow was lighting up. My sister's 3 kids, Madison, Kayla, and Tyler, in matching red plaid pajamas, draping tinsel on the tree while a holiday movie played, wrapping paper scattered across the rug, Brittany filming with one hand while eating popcorn with the other. 2 days before the supposedly adults-only party, in the same house where my 6-year-old couldn't get 15 minutes to hand his grandmother a wooden star, I rang the doorbell. My mother opened it and didn't invite me in. She filled the doorway, one hand braced on the frame, her actual grandchildren laughing at their actual tree behind her. I kept my voice level. No kids this year, Mom. And my mother, my church hospitality committee mother, looked me dead in the eye and said, without a single flicker, these children deserve to be here. Brittany appeared over her shoulder, smiling like oil on water. I looked at the 2 of them, framed in the doorway of a house I'd spent 2 years rescuing, handed my mother the gingerbread, and said, I'll see you tomorrow night. I walked back to my car with steady hand, drove home, and ironed my good green dress. That evening, Caleb asked one more time if he could go to Grandma Lorraine's party, carefully, the way kids ask when they already suspect the answer. The wooden star cradled in both hands like a ticket. I knelt down so we were eye level, because the big sentences shouldn't be delivered from above. You're going to have Christmas somewhere people are actually happy to see you, I told him. That's our new rule, and Mom doesn't break the rule. He considered that with his whole face, then asked if the orchard had a chimney, and just like that we were fine, because 6-year-olds always check the things that really matter. He spent the night of the 24th with Hal and Ruth, flowers still on his sleeves by sundown, and I have never in my life been so grateful to have my son 8 minutes away and an entire world apart from where I was headed. Back home, I ironed the green dress, the one Travis used to call my courtroom dress, the one I wore whenever life required signatures. I set the yellow folder next to my keys, painted my nails, steadied the polish brush the way I'd steady a syringe. On my way to bed, I stopped at the shelf where his photos sit, that grin he always wore at the top of a pole and told him the plan out loud, because some conversations don't care about physics. You'd hate this party, I said. You'd love what I'm bringing to it. Then I slept 8 solid hours. Guilty people toss and turn all night. I slept just fine. Christmas Eve, 7 o'clock. My parents' house looked like the cover of a magazine that stopped existing years ago. Electric candles in every window. The tree dressed to the collarbone in gold. Buffet table running the length of the dining room. For the record, the ham anchoring the center of that table was the ham my $300 had paid for. Dressed up with a sprig of rosemary like it had always belonged there. 20-some guests drifted through downstairs with punch cup. 4 guild ladies with silver helmet hair and auditor's eyes. Eileen the pastor's wife, radiating the kind of quiet that makes people confess at potluck. Aunt Carol posted by the bookcase, watching the room the way I watch a monitor. Doug loud by the fireplace mid-story, about some supplier he'd outsmarted. Somehow both the victim and the hero of his own tale. On the staircase, in their church clothes, sat my sister's 3 kids. The alt's only rule, having quietly died at the door it was supposedly guarding. Tyler waved at me. I waved back, because none of this was ever about the children. My mother crossed the room in full hostess mode, took my arm, and presented me to the guild ladies like a display piece. You all know my youngest, the nurse. She's always so busy we barely see her. Honey with a pin buried inside it. I smiled, said the punch was lovely, and let her steer me past. The yellow folder sat in my purse against my hip, patient as a stethoscope. Every lie in that room was wearing velvet that night. I was the only thing in it without a costume. It happened the way these things do, arriving with a smile and a punch cup in hand. Around 8, Brittany tapped a spoon against her glass and called for a toast, and the room obliged. She raised her cider toward our mother, tears carefully staged in the corners of her eyes. To Mom, who holds this family together with her own 2 hands. Glasses lifted, a round of cheers went up, and then Sandra from the guild, 4 decades of church potluck and 0 filtered thought, said the line that lit the fuse without knowing it was one. Lorraine, honestly, I don't know how you 2 manage it on a pension with everything so expensive now. You keep this house so beautifully. The room hummed in agreement, and my mother, warmed by cider and lamplight and 20 guests worth of admiration, straightened up, pressed a hand to her chest, and said it. We manage because we don't owe anybody anything. We've never taken a dime from a soul. Everything in this house. Frank and I earned every bit of it. The mantel clock ticked twice. I felt the whole room the way you feel a pulse under your palm, and I knew, without looking, that my father was staring at the carpet, like it was deep water. Carol was looking straight at me. My heart did the thing it does in a code when everyone else's panic climbs toward the ceiling and mine drops through the floor, slow and clear. There's a particular silence in an ER right before you call it. The noise stops, and the room turns to you and waits. That living room did exactly that, though nobody in it knew it yet. I set my punch cup on the bookcase next to Carol, who took it from my hand without being asked, the way a nurse takes an instrument. Mom, I said, my voice hitched at the volume I use for medication instructions, low enough that people lean in to hear. Tell them about October 2016. You could practically hear the furnace kick on, the one I'd apparently paid for. My mother's smile stayed fixed in place but stopped reaching anything behind it. Athena, honey, this is a party. I agreed. It was a party. And then I did exactly what I'd promised myself at my kitchen table. No speech, no dramatic build-up, just the fact, in order, delivered the way I deliver lab results, because fact don't need my emotion attached to them. In January 2024, you showed me a past due notice and told me the bank would start foreclosure in 10 days. Since then, I've sent $650 on the first of every month, 24 months. I paid $1,200 for gum surgery, $900 for a furnace, and $300 poured tonight. I nodded at the buffet. That ham is mine. $18,000, all told. Nobody moved. Doug's mouth hung open mid-sentence, frozen. I reached into my purse, pulled out the folder, and laid the first page flat on the white tablecloth, angled so the room could see it. The raised seal catching lamplight the way embossed things do. This is a certified copy from the Arden County Recorder's Office. Anyone can request one. It's public record. My mother reached for it, and I let her, because you can't crumple a fact, only a copy of one. Satisfaction of mortgage, I told the room gently, like reading the tag on a gift. Paid in full. October 2016. The clock ticked on. Somewhere on the staircase, a small shoe scuffed a step. 9 years before you cried at your kitchen table about losing this house. It was already yours. There was never a foreclosure. There was never even a loan. Sandra set her plate down without a sound. Eileen lowered her cup onto its saucer, porcelain ringing once, small and bright, like a bell in a courtroom. Aunt Carol stepped forward, lifted the certified copy off the tablecloth, read it front to back through her reading glasses, and looked at my mother, with 60 years of shared history draining out of her face. Lori, she said, this is the county seal. Nobody in that room argued with a county seal. Through all of it, my voice never rose above the hum of the dishwasher. Brittany broke first. Brittany always breaks first. And I I'd spent years mistaking that for confidence. She shot off the couch, cider sloshing, voice climbing into the smoke alarm register, and in front of the pastor's wife, the guild, and her own children on the stairs, she screamed out a confession I hadn't even accused her of yet. It's family money. It stayed in the family. I let it land fully before answering, level as a spirit bubble. So was mine. Then came my mother, running through her entire repertoire in about 30 seconds because a cornered performer plays every song she knows. First, the paperwork must be wrong. Banks make mistakes constantly. Then, I was cruel, doing arithmetic against my own mother at Christmas in front of guests. Then the mask came off entirely, her voice dropping into a hiss I'd never once heard from her. Grateful. 18 years I raised you, and you stand in my house counting. Doug started toward me, chest leading the way. That's when my father stood up. Frank Hollis, who hadn't raised his voice indoors in my entire lifetime, said, "Sit down, Doug." And Doug sat, the way men like Doug always do when a real voice finally shows up. My father turned to my mother, quieter now, worn down like an old lunchbox. "Lori, it's done." He didn't defend me. Let's be honest about that. He simply stopped lying, which after 2 years was its own kind of thunder. Brittany, drowning now, threw out the last secret as a weapon. "I told Mom to keep your kid home." He repeats everything he hears. And there it was, in front of witnesses. The adults only rule had exactly one child's name attached to it the whole time. I took out my phone, opened the banking app, and tapped 4 times. Then I turned the screen so the room could see it. Transfer canceled. "The support ends tonight." I said all of it. "You told me these children deserve to be here. You were right about one thing, Mom. Deserving matters. My son deserves better than a family he has to be smuggled past." I picked up my purse and left the folder lying on the tablecloth. I had my own copies, and they needed theirs, and wished the room a Merry Christmas at ordinary conversational volume. Nobody answered. On my way down the hallway, I passed the staircase where my sister's 3 kids sat wide-eyed in their church clothes, and I stopped for half a second because there are lines even a controlled burn shouldn't cross. "It's not your fault, girl, Tyler." Madison looked at me with an expression I recognized instantly. A kid doing math she shouldn't have had to do. Then I opened the front door and stepped into the season's first real snow, the slow, fat kind, and heard the noise erupt behind me through the glass. My mother's voice climbing, Brittany's climbing over it, Doug rumbling underneath. A kingdom auditing itself. The door opened again before I reached my car. It was Carol, carrying my scarf. She wrapped it around my neck the way you'd bundle up an 8-year-old, jaw set tight against the cold. "Your grandmother would have clapped, child," she said, and went back inside to watch the second act. I sat in my car for 10 seconds, hands on the wheel, and let out one long breath, the kind you release when the ambulance doors finally shut. Then I drove 8 minutes through the falling snow to the orchard. Every window of that farmhouse glowed gold. Through the front glass I could see my son, in his pajamas, up on Hal's shoulders, reaching high while Hal steadied him, watching Caleb set that crooked little gold star, the one that said Grandma L on the back, onto the top branch of the Chambers family tree. Some houses you have to knock on. That one was already mine. Here's what January looked like, in plain numbers, since numbers are how this whole thing started. The transfer still leaves my account on the 1st of every month. $650, same as always. It just changed direction. Now it lands in Caleb's college fund. The first time I watched it land there, the knot under my ribs finally let go and didn't leave a note behind. My mother called 11 times over 2 weeks. The voicemails swung from hissing to honeyed and back again. The day she got to the part about me ruining her standing at the guild, I blocked the number. The guild, for its part, handled things the way small towns always do. No trial, no verdict, just a new name quietly appearing at the top of the spring luncheon committee list. My sister sent exactly one text. "You've torn this family apart." I read it twice and set the phone down. Torn it apart? I'd only turned the lights on. Whatever fell over was already leaning. From my father came a Christmas card, 10 days late, my name in his cramped handwriting, 2 $20 bills wrapped in a paper towel inside, and one shaky line. "I'm sorry I didn't send it back, and I didn't call." I tucked it into Travis's box, next to the card about telling the truth even when your voice shakes, because that's where I keep the men who at least tried. My door isn't locked to my father. It just doesn't open for stories anymore. Truth is the password now, and he knows it. On Christmas morning, while a certain house across town sat quiet around its perfect tree, my son came down Ruth's staircase to cocoa and paper crowns, Hal wearing sleigh bells on his boots at 67. And the only party that ever really mattered had a guest list of 4 and a crooked gold star presiding over the whole thing. I used to believe family meant people who share your blood, but family is the people who make room for your child at the table without needing to be paid for it. My son deserves to be somewhere he's actually wanted, so that's exactly where we live now. That's my story. 24 months of transfers, one folded statement in a junk drawer, and a county stamp nobody could argue with. If this reminded you to double check before sending money to family, even the people people who raised you. Take it as your sign. Check the record. Protect your kid. If someone you love needs to hear this, share it with them. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.